Just go.
Dude, honest, I don't know what it is about me and like nicknames, but I just literally don't care. I had a preference when I was like 10 and I got on this kick where everybody called me Mikey. And then that stuck for a long time. And I was like, you know what? I'm never picking a nickname again. This is
Yeah, I don't think
so,
I'd ever call. I don't think I've ever called anybody Mikey. But no, it's funny. I think that's the first time I've ever called you Mike, and it's just slipped out because I nickname a lot of people, but it's just general, right? Like
yeah.
it's Mike. So Michael, Mike, Mr. McAllister. Guys, before we get in today's topic, first and foremost, I do want to take a minute to just recognize some shit that happened at the time of this recording happened this week in our industry. We lost two great people. And that's Kevin Delorey, who's the chief lending officer at EPM, and Michael Halterman, who was a loan officer at a broker. He had his own DBA, but he was at Edge Home Finance. Client Michael was, I coached Michael for the last 7 months. Really good dude, a solid guy, and I was just talking about that this morning with someone else in the industry, and just how kind of like what does that do? It's just like what kind of like changes does that make you kind of want to take when you're kind of close to someone? And then Kevin, who I worked with at APM, and he had a battle with cancer for a while, but he was in remission, and then it just kind of came back full force, and unfortunately he passed. So I did want to give our thoughts and prayers to the families and friends of both Michael and Kevin, and so I just want to take a minute to do that. And Michael, do you want to add anything?
No, well said. I appreciated the opportunity to work with Michael. I didn't know Kevin. I didn't even really know Michael, so I can't imagine those that are close to him, and how they're feeling. But I appreciated the opportunity to have him as a client when we did, and yeah, really, same thing. Thoughts and prayers out to the families and you and anybody else that was close to these guys. That's just life is crazy. Life's a trip, man.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's you never know. You never know. Tomorrow's never promised. So I think the mini message in this in today's episode is, and I've been doing it this week. I've been talking to people. I've been calling people who are in my life and telling them I appreciate them and care for them and thank you for everyone I did. Same thing, right? Like you gotta make what you can when these things happen, the lessons that you learn from other people. And sometimes it's unfortunate that it takes those things in order to kind of like slap you back, but hey, if you're looking for positives, that's one.
Yep.
Again, our deepest condolences to the family and friends of those two great professionals.
Amen.
Switching gears into today's episode, before we get into it, we have a cool partnership on tap, and it's going to be something that right now isn't really done. Anyone that knows me knows I like to do shit first. I like to be different. And so we're going to be announcing it and talking about that. And this episode is kind of like around that concept and topic of what this webinar is going to be. And it's on April 23rd at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The link will be in the show notes. It will be done in conjunction of Michael, myself, and Brian View at FinLocker. And we're going to be talking about, I just gave it just a quick name, and that's just creating like an elite pre-qual system. Right. And today's topic is basically like having a before the funnel ecosystem. And what does that look like? And what are we talking about with that? And that's what we're going to talk about today, because it's super important, because ultimately, I think the journey of today's consumer, or let me put it this way, today's consumer is already expecting a different journey. Right. And the mortgage industry, by and large, just tries to repackage the same shit and just like change it a little bit or whatever, without truly understanding the dichotomy of what that looks like. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, based off of like, stuff that we're doing. And the reason we're doing this and like this webinar and whatnot is because we see the opportunity to not our opportunity. Obviously, our opportunity is just a byproduct of the opportunity of the originator to create this ecosystem for the consumer that all it's going to do is save them money and increase their conversions long term, because the funnel isn't a quick one, it's a long-term funnel. But really what it comes down to, where your opportunity is how do you create that stickiness, that relevance for long term, why the consumer is going to get ads and everything else until they're actually ready to move forward.
Yeah. This is honestly one of the things that makes marketing mortgages one of the toughest things to market. Is honest, like, this is going to sound backwards, but it's that almost everybody is going to be within your target market at some point.
Yep.
Right. And so it's the classic, the classic commodity discussion, right? Like, at the end of the day, almost like at some point, everybody wants to buy a house. It's the American dream. And so what that means is you always have, going back to that word you used earlier, that dichotomy between like attracting people and having messaging that attracts people, and making sure that you're attracting people at the right time in your business. And you can either do this by trying to snipe people and trying to like be perfect at timing when people are going to be in the market, or you can create an ecosystem, you can create a community, you can create a space where people exist and hang out and get value from you long before they're actually in the buying process. And so that's that idea of like a pre-funnel ecosystem, is that you're trying to create a space where people have a reason to receive value from you, to see your face, to communicate with you, and think of you long before they actually know they're ready to buy a house. And so that's what I love about the FinLocker, the Key Steps app, right? And FinLocker in general, we've always loved it. We've had clients that have been working with FinLocker for a while. This idea that like you can give something of value no matter at what point in the buying journey, or whether they even think they're in the buying journey yet. You're giving something of value that gives them a level of stickiness, a level of engagement that where whenever they're ready to buy a house, they're right there. You're already in an ecosystem with them. So yeah, really excited to be doing the webinar. Excited to talk about this topic. This is something that has really grown in traction over the last few years, going from kind of looking at your sales process as a linear funnel from A to Z, and more looking at it as a space, a community, a ecosystem where you have off ramps to bring people into your funnel when it's appropriate.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I've talked about for at least the last 3 years, that the modern consumer's journey is no longer linear, and your marketing has to start before the consumer even knows who you are, right? And a lot of people don't understand that, and that's because they're kind of stuck in the dogma of how they've always done this business. And when Michael just was when he was talking about linear, I was just thinking about like the only linear that happens is once they're like in process, right? And you're like processing their loan, right? And you're going through that. Like, that's when you get into the manufacturing aspect. That's when it's linear. And even then, there's still some things that you gotta, you gotta understand and do from a communication standpoint. But ultimately, like, they're not going to come in the way that you think. And when in our marketing tends to, not our marketing, but like the industry's marketing is really built for someone that's like, I'm ready. They're built for, like, if you look at the process, if you're calling it like, let's say, I don't know, let's just do it from like a 1 to 5, right? Of like, there's 5 steps. Let's just call it that again, just for the sake of argument. 5 steps, right? Like, our marketing is built for like step 4.5 to 5, right? Yeah. Like, the marketing is not built for steps 1 through 3. Right. And because the reason why is because the school of thought is like, when they're ready to go, right? It's that instant gratification, instant ROI. I do this, I get this. And that's not what you want, right? You want to nurture those, right? And that term tends to, also get like a different, type of, definition. But nurturing means like you're nurturing during the process. You want to be basically what I'm saying is that there's a lot of different steps that a journey goes through, a lot of different hoops, right? And so you need to be you need to be one, relevant and memorable, but you need to be in those places, giving them that information before they get to step four and a half, and five, right? If you're the one that's actually guiding them through to where they get to that point where everyone else is meeting them, who do you think is going to have that trust? Who do you think is going to have that likability? It's going to be you, right? And so I have some stats here. And when we're talking about, like, Michael made a good point that like everyone that you meet is eventually going to be in your wheelhouse. But here's the thing. It has nothing to do with their age, sex, any of that. The normal demographics that we look at people are what the psychographics, so to speak, right? Like none of that really matters. What matters is this, right? I'm gonna give you guys three stats, right? And this came from Kristen Meserly's Next Gen Buyer Report, right? And these are the people that are right in our wheelhouse to become home owners, right? One is 59% believe it's not a good time to buy a house. So that's an important stat right there. 19% thinks a good time and 22% are unsure, right? Now, but here's the stats. Like this is what and this is important, right? What I'm going to tell you is also going to be what you should be speaking about and where you should become the expert on is these 5 topics. High cost of living. That's a barrier number 1. Barrier number 2 is income, low income. Barrier number 3 is uncertainty about the future. And I want to stop on this one for a second because the ultimate driver of when a consumer makes any type of high ticket economic decision, this could be moving, this could just be generally like renting and moving to one place to another, taking a job, whatever, is confidence in their situation, right? So uncertainty about the future is number 3. Number 4 is existing debt. And number 5 is like lack of financial knowledge, right? And so when we're talking about this ecosystem, right? And again, we're not saying like this isn't a thing about the webinar, but now I think you guys are going to see why this webinar is important, right? And also I just want to listen, this webinar isn't about selling you shit, right? Yeah, yes, there's something for you to tap into, but that's not what the webinar is to give you all the data to let you know that like, if you want to have higher conversions, right, you need to meet the consumer at steps 1 through 3, and you got to have a way to captivate their attention during that process in order for you to have a higher pull-through ratio, to have better conversion from the micros to the macro, like all of that shit. And so you just have to understand these things. And if you don't, then you're going to be competing against the shops with bigger budgets that do understand these things.
Yeah. I want to point to some examples of both of these ideas, right? Yep. Besides the FinLocker app, because obviously that's one and one that we'll talk more about going forward. But in general, there's some other examples that we can point to maybe help people connect the dots here, right? So like an example of targeting steps 4 through 5 is like all your Facebook posts about interest rates or about the closing that you just had, or like any of these, like anything that you would call a business post on your social media profile is likely in that category of like trying to snipe people, like trying to find people like while they are in the perfect spot. You're hoping your message shows up to the right person at the right time. Yep. And if it does, then maybe they reach out and we can have a conversation about a mortgage. The alternative the alternative to this would be like having a community, having a Facebook community dedicated to real estate investing in your market, right? That's a great example of an ecosystem that you're creating where there's a reason for people to be involved, to be engaged. There's a reason for people to look at you for expertise long before they're at steps 4 or 5 in their buying cycle, long before they have, like, they know in their head, okay, hey, I'm ready to buy. So that would be an example of an ecosystem, would be like that real estate investing group. You could even take it off online and you could go analog with this, and you could say that you're I don't know, I wouldn't necessarily call it like a BNI group, something like that, but I know that there's people, Southern California, they have real estate caravans, right? And so this is a little bit different. This isn't talking about consumers. This is talking about real estate agents, but real estate caravans, realtor open house, or realtor, what else do they call it? I don't remember what else they call it, but basically it's this, like within the local market, they have one day a week where a bunch of real estate agents, a bunch of affiliates meet up, have a conversation about the houses that are on the market, and then they'll even hold those houses open for a couple hours at like 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. on a Thursday or something, so that everybody can kind of go around and check that out. Well, affiliates run that shit. Why do affiliates, what do I mean by affiliates? Lenders, title companies, etc. Why do they run that? Well, it's because they're creating an ecosystem. Like, they know that a lot of the real estate agents in there are using other lenders. They're not telling them, hey, you have to be using me in order to come to this caravan. They're doing it so that they can create an ecosystem where they're present and they're thought about, so that when that agent does get to a point in their cycle, right, when they get to a point where they're like, oh shit, my lender just messed up and now I need a new one, like, you're the person they think about. Okay, so it's the same thing with consumers. Again, whether it's an old school, like an in-person group, or it's something online, you're creating a space where people have an excuse to be like engaging with you and getting information from you without necessarily feeling like they're being sold to, and then having off ramps within that give them the opportunities to reach out and engage with you around what you do when it counts, when it matters.
And one thing to think about that as you're listening and realizing like your business, your messaging, and is understand like, where are they accessing that information, right? And it's not where you think they are. And ultimately, and I have some more stats that I'll share because I think it goes important. Understanding is that when we're talking about information access, the top 5 sites, and none of them are Google search, by the way, right? It's Reddit, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, right? Across the generations. YouTube number 1 by far, right? And so I'm just going to say this right now. If you're not leveraging YouTube, you're going to be behind, and you're already behind. Let me put it this way. You are behind if you're not leveraging YouTube. Now, if you're like, hey, my business is doing well right now, just think what it would be if you leverage YouTube, right? And so, and ultimately, like, that's what you got to understand. But like, using like research, Gen Z, millennials, heavy social media, and then also heavy AI, because that way so Google's being bypassed a lot. Not to say that it's not important, but what I'm saying is that, is people that are focused really on like the SEO aspect of Google, right? Like, hey, how does my website rank and stuff like that? Like, don't get me wrong, Google search still number 1, right? So guys, I don't want you to take me saying that, you shouldn't be using Google. What I'm saying is the focus that loan officers seem to be having on like the SEO aspect of their website just really isn't that important. Right. It just that just is not important anymore. What's more important is that you can be found on the platforms that they're searching, that they are searching that. And that's like Reddit. Reddit's like, for example, Reddit and Google have a good tie-in. So if you're doing content on Reddit, like, that's where your Google search plays in. Obviously, Google Business, right? Like your ads, your reviews, like your profile, like that's YouTube too, right? So like, there's a tie in there. So I don't want you guys to get me wrong saying that Google's not important. Google's just important in a different way than it traditionally used to be. And so you got to understand is that information access, that's what we're talking about. Everything that Michael was talking about, like, their knowledge, where are they going to get the information? How are you going to inform them? How are you going to stay relevant? You got to be on the platforms that they are. You got to meet them where they're going to be, and YouTube being, top game for that. And so, and before everyone's like, well, I don't want to do TikTok. You don't have to. What I'm saying is those are the channels. You need to decide to like, which one can you go all in? My recommendation is YouTube. The people that I'm working with at a high level that generally don't have to chase business and haven't for years are all using YouTube without a doubt. Like, they don't have to chase agents. They don't have to chase business. They don't have to cold call. They don't do any of that stuff, right? The stuff that most people hate to do, they just use YouTube. Doesn't mean that you don't do all of that stuff. Every business is going to be different. What I'm saying is like, that's the route that you go. And so when you start using YouTube for those steps 1 through 4, essentially, and that's your main play of the education and delivering what they don't have, and the fact that ultimately the generation that we're trying to provide education and services to, they don't trust us, right? So they did that during this report. They asked like the trust level of certain institutions, banks, credit unions, loan officers, and agents, right? Guess who was last place? Loan officers was the last place in trust. Number one in trust was banks. Now, it doesn't mean they didn't have high trust, but it was higher than credit unions and loan officers and agents. So it went like this: banks, credit unions, agents, loan officers. So how do you get around that? You get around it by being the trusted source up front that's not asking for anything other than like you want to be the one that's memorable and the one that's delivering the information that they're going for based off of their challenges. So the more that you throw in there about the shit that everyone else is going to, like rates, for like if you want to be a commodity, continue the post about rates, because then that's all you're going to be. That's all anyone's going to care about with what you're talking about is about rates. Okay. And the problem is that like everyone, when we just went through that like 15-second, utopia of rates being better. Right. And then they went back and got work, whatever. Like everyone was like super excited and talked about it like a day late or that day. And then they didn't say shit. And so essentially, and then what do you say? Like when you were just, like whistling Dixie, a week ago on the same rates that now you're like, oh, now the rates went back up and they're worse. You just basically called like what you were selling before worse. You know what I mean? So like that's the problem you get into when you focus only on the rate conversation and not focus on like, how do I create a successful plan and strategy for you to be a home buyer based off of your concerns and challenges? This is what we're talking about.
Yeah. Social platforms can 100% either be like a spark for the ecosystem that you build, or they can be the entire ecosystem. Those LOs that are successful on YouTube, those LOs that are successful on TikTok. It's not that every time they post, they get every time they post, they get a new 10,000 people that see it. They're building a following. They're building an ecosystem. When you post repeatedly on YouTube and you post this type of content, you're building an ecosystem of people that you don't even know. These people, these people see your video. They subscribe. They see your videos every time you post, even if they don't subscribe. If they watch 3 minutes of one video, then YouTube's going to retarget them for the next. And so, these social platforms are really like the easiest, lowest hanging fruit for building that ecosystem. For most people, at least building it from scratch, building it from zero. But even then, I would argue that like the next step for anybody that's successful on one of those social platforms is to transition those people from being inside of the YouTube community that I'm a part of also to transitioning to being a part of my community. So 100%. Whether that's a school community or a Facebook group or the FinLocker app or Key Steps or whatever it is, like, these social platforms are a great place to like spark that community and that ecosystem. But obviously, the next step would be, hey, how do I make this so that they don't have to go to YouTube to consume my content? What if YouTube is no longer relevant in the future? Like, how am I keeping up and creating a community and ecosystem that transcends this social platform? And full circle, that's why I'm most excited to talk about the webinar and like the opportunity behind creating these like micro ecosystems, and what that means for your business.
Yeah, and totally stole my thunder there. That's how I was going to wrap the episode, was with that point. But that's why this
thanks
works.
For listening.
Yeah. So Michael will not be joining you on the next MLO project episode. No, but I think it's good because, and that's why I think, we work well together, is because we really have the same type of thought process when it comes to growth for originators. Is that, the way I was going to wrap it up is to that same point, because everything that we talked about, like YouTube, TikTok, all of that shit's rented, right? You don't own any of that stuff, and they could change, as algorithms change, policies, procedure, like shit changes. And when it does, like you have to deal with it and then scurry around trying to figure it out. That's why, like, when people are like, I built my whole business on this, and then something happens and then they start like complaining about it. It's like, that was on you. Like I would never go build my business on the back. Like, I'm not going to go build what is the term? Build a mansion on rented land, because like I don't own the land. And so like, I'm not going to invest and build an empire on some shit that could just be taken out of me. So so you're like, okay, well, I get that. Then what do you do? And that's what we're talking about, is like, you need to have a way to have your own community to bring these people in so you could have that one-to-one. Russell Brunson said this. He said that if you don't own your list, then you don't own your business. And so what that means is that you have to get these people information into your CRM data, whatever it is, right? Like you have to get their information in there. You gotta know their phone and their data. You gotta have that on something that you control, because email, and yes, could someone make the argument that email is rented too? Yes, but it's not like something, there's no algorithm to
From
email.
a technical standpoint, I could argue till I'm blue in the face about how email is like an open platform for anybody, like from a technical standpoint, I would say email's the furthest from being rented for sure.
Exactly. I'm just saying like you'd have to get an email server and shit, like just again, because
Right.
you got those loan officers out there. We're like, well, you know what you said. So like,
I don't own the postal service either.
I'm just getting ahead of that crap. But like what I'm saying is that like email is the only true like one-to-one connection that you're going to have, that no matter what algorithm does what, like you're still going to be able to have that way to make communication, or picking up the damn phone, right? Like, again, shout out to Todd Bitter, but picking up the damn phone, both on the receiving side, but also on like calling people and texting, right? Like all of that shit is the stuff that you need to be able to do. And you don't want to be slapped in the face by a platform that you don't own, because you decided like you didn't want to do any of that. And so anyway, and that's obviously the, stuff like we're going to talk about on the webinar is more of like, a tactical, piece of it, like using the platforms, but that's not what this episode for. The episode was talking about the strategy and the mindset, and that how you're going to have to play the game. And because you got to understand that first, because otherwise it doesn't matter what platform, technology, or marketing, content, coaching, it doesn't matter. None of that. If you don't have the mindset and the realization of how the game needs to be played and how you need to be successful at it, none of that shit matters, because you're not going to believe it. You're not going to buy into it. You're not going to do anything with it. Right. And so hopefully, with what we talked about today, you get it. You understand it a little bit more. You understand like the different ways that you'll be looking on it. We look forward to having you on the webinar. Again, the link will be in the show notes, so you could hang with us, and we'll like to show you exactly what we're going to do to help you with that. Not to mention, like, hey, if you are tired of like the soft pull costs that you're paying on credit and all the other shit involved with it, this solves that problem too. So with that, excuse me, got choked up a little bit. But with that, Michael, do you have any final words, or are we ready to wrap?
No, man.
You ready to steal some more freaking thunder? You ready to?
Yeah, show up to the podcast. Great point show up to the webinar. Great point on the credit pulls piece. We never even touched on that that. And that I know is what Brian's most excited is saving, loan officers hundreds of dollars a month on credit pulls, soft pulls, et cetera. So if you want to learn more about that, join us on the webinar, and we're excited to see you.
100%. All right, my friends, look, keep doing what you're doing. Keep making the MLO Project the #1 podcast that's generally ever been created, right? So just keep doing the reviews, keep doing the downloads, the sharing of that. We really, really appreciate it. Make sure to, whether it's Spotify, Apple, or whatever, subscribe. I won't say, I was going to say something. I won't say it on this episode. I listened.
The intrusive thought was suppressed.
It was. I was like, I was about to say something. I'm like, I'll hold off on that one. But guys, we're having fun, and we appreciate your feedback on the content, the episodes, people you want to hear from. And guys, look, my final thought is go listen to the damn episode with Bryce. Right? Like that was I meant to say that in the beginning, but dude, that episode was, he's a young kid coming. I mean, he's not a young kid now, but like he was coming in 2019. He's originated a loan every single month he's been in the business. The dude's an operator, and guys, look, there's people that have been in the industry since 2000 that can't get a loan to save their lives. This dude's crushing it. Listen to that episode. You're going to find out why. So.
Yeah. Amen.
Awesome. All right. On behalf of Mr. McAllister, I am Frazier. We are with Empower LO, the official sponsor of the MLO Project and the unofficial sponsor of High Level in the mortgage industry. And we'll see you on the next episode. Take care. That was good. I like that. I'm going to start using that in the tagline.
The unofficial sponsor of High Level. We might have to find some different words. Well, I guess we do sponsor High Level. We pay them
right. Like, and it's unofficial, right? If I say it's unofficial, I'm not saying it's official. It's the unofficial NASCAR sponsor.
Oh, that's funny.